Opal Tometi is the co-founder of Black Lives Matter, the international movement campaigning against systemic racism. Now on BBC World News, BBC Africa reporter Daniel Henry talks to her in Washington, D.C. about what's informed the person she is and the work she does, in part 2 of African Diaspora Diaries.
Breathtaking. Thank you. Seriously. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm here today with the BBC. My name is Opal Tometi. I'm a co-founder of Black Lives Matter. And
it started on social media, with a message that got millions onto the streets across America and around the world. Opal Tometi is the co-founder of Black Lives Matter. She was raised in Phoenix, Arizona, works from Washington, D.C., but her roots are in Lagos, Nigeria. Your Twitter bio, your website, you describe yourself as a Nigerian American. It's not saying I am an African American, which you might expect from someone who is black and based in the US. I was just wondering why you've made that distinction.
you know, I am Nigerian American. My parents were born and raised in Nigeria. In fact, my great-grandpa was from Togo, and his grandpa migrated to the Cameroon, and then my grandpa was born in the Cameroon and then migrated to Nigeria, and then my parents met in Nigeria, and they eventually migrated to Phoenix, Arizona. You know, I grew up, like I was sharing, with a beautiful community of Nigerian immigrants, so uncles and aunties, even if they weren't bad blood, you know, we call everybody uncle, uncle, auntie, you know, it's, you know, we're all cousins, we're all family, even if it's not biological.
Opal told me that she grew up speaking Pidgin English at home because her parents spoke Yoruba and Ishan. But those aren't the only memories she has of growing up in America.
We found ourselves in my late middle school and high school days. My parents were, they didn't have their documents. They eventually fell out of their immigration status and were in deportation proceedings. You know, that was a really hard time for us. That was a really hard time for us. My grandpa passed away when I was young, and my mom wasn't able to go back to bury him. And I remember,
wow.
Yeah, that was the first time I ever saw her cry. She wasn't able to go back and bury her father.
Opal has never forgotten how close her family came to being deported.
And now we're seeing unprecedented imprisonment, immigrant detention, and deportation
Those memories led to the creation of BAJI, the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, 13 years ago. It's an organisation that Opal says is needed more now than ever.
With Donald Trump, under his leadership, we've seen the highest number of deportations of African immigrants. And that to me is alarming, it's terrifying, and it means that we have to actually be doing the work in our own communities to ensure that people know their rights and that they're able to assert their rights in the right context, in the right ways, so that they could have a chance of staying with their families. What we're concerned about is that the type of animosity, the type of coverage that immigration detention officials, these officers have because of the type of administration we have now, means that they're emboldened to act in these ways. They feel like they can get away with it, and you know what? They're going to deport them in a couple weeks anyway, so they don't care, and they aren't feeling the consequence. And there isn't enough public outcry when this happens to our people because they feel like it's isolated, it's away, maybe they did something to deserve to be in detention, so who cares what happens? But we have to care. It could be any one of us, and we have to be concerned when people are being racially profiled, eventually detained, and eventually deported. It has an impact on all of us.
Now, Opal's parents help new arrivals to find their way in America from a church that they run in Phoenix.
And this form taught me so much about myself, so much about...
Opal went to high school in that state, and while she was there, she set up a step dancing crew called Dangerous. It didn't quite make it to a professional standard, but these guys did. Step Africa have been taking this art form around the world since the early 90s. Watching them practice took Opal back to her teenage years, when her first trip to Nigeria changed her life.
Visiting Nigeria as a 17-year-old informs everything about me, I think, today. I was able to go and finally connect with my blood cousins, right? Not my cousins and, quote unquote cousins here. But I was able to go, meet my cousins, meet some of my aunts and uncles I had never met, and finally get to know their stories and get to see how they lived and their ambitions. And hearing also the frustration that they had in the Nigerian government, their prospects for jobs, and me as their American cousin, really being confronted with that.
It sounds like that trip you came away with a very clear sense of what your life could have been like had you been born in Nigeria.
My cousins were essentially a mirror of what could have been and what I could be. It stayed with me, and it stays with me even now. The reality was that my parents had a unique set of privileges as a result of making it, quote unquote, in the US and being able to be here in the US, beating their deportation case, and me being able to stay with them in Phoenix. So it allowed for different types of opportunities that I wouldn't have had in Nigeria, and I'm really certain and clear of that.
The Black Lives Matter movement has been a huge part of Opal's life. It began following the fatal shooting of Trayvon Martin and the acquittal of his killer in 2013.
His leg broken, y'all dragging him like that!
Since then, the Black Lives Matter movement has forced America to confront a simple question. Why are black people more likely to be killed by police than white people?
There are several stories, even right now, of unarmed black people being profiled and being murdered. So Black Lives Matter originally started as a rallying cry. I didn't want somebody who stalked and killed a teenage boy to be okay and to be validated, and that to be the end of it.
Trayvon was 17 years old. What happened to him put gun violence and racism right at the top of the political agenda.
If I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon. And, I think they are right to expect that all of us as Americans are going to take this with the seriousness it deserves, and that we're going to get to the bottom of exactly what happened.
But after 6 years of Black Lives Matter protests and campaigns, what's really changed?
I believe there is more visibility about anti-black racism and just structural racism, period, in the United States. And I believe the movement that is way bigger than myself and the two co-founders of Black Lives Matter have ushered in a type of conversation and politic that says you're not going to turn away from these issues of injustice that are happening and plaguing this society. However, it has been really challenging to see substantive strides towards the eradication of the types of extrajudicial killing we've been seeing en masse. In their hearts and their minds, people around the world have a consciousness. They have a conscience. And so when you see an unarmed teenager being gunned down in the street, you know something's wrong. You know something's wrong when the murderer goes to trial and is let go.
Opal is proud of all the steps she's made towards changing lives in America.
So I have my Nigerian background and my roots, but I still am a part of black culture as it is. Here I'm truly a Nigerian American.
Right.
So.
That's exactly. Yeah, we should definitely talk about that. Yeah, that's so my experience.
But could her future be in Africa?
I always encourage people, if they have the means and ability to travel abroad, that they should. Because I get to go back, about once a year, I'm beginning to see all the possibilities in Nigeria. I'm beginning to see, emergent economies or industries, and able to see the ways in which nightlife is changing, or different restaurants are opening up, or various new clothing brands, and all of these amazing, innovative people who are doing a lot of really great work, and just the potential. I would love to live and work in Nigeria one day. If there is a way, I will be there. My heart is there. The pulse almost of a place like Lagos, which is so rapid. And I would love to make a living there. I would love to have my own family one day.
So right now you're going to learn what we just did.
And more importantly, could she still step?
Thank you. You say that it's been a couple of years, but you were looking like
Thank you.